Oh, happy Monday, everybody. As always, you're in great company. My show, as always, is about people, recognising that it really is okay to not be okay. So turn up your radio. Now, it's the first week of December, and wow, did we kick it off with a stormy start. Buckets of rain and plenty of sparks. So I hope everyone's safe and well also. Now, yesterday we had our annual 3WBC Christmas party, which was an absolute standout from all of the years. We had fantastic acts. The great Ken Lyons attempted some mind reading with me as his subject. Now, that didn't go as well as we had rehearsed on the Saturday, but got us some laughs, and that was at our expense. Michelle Ciccardo and Loris regaling us with their incredible singing voices. Jeremy Sampson from the program Off the Spectrum was to perform some juggling, which actually ended up more like bouncing, but it was a bit of fun, and it was a very, very merry time. And I do want to give a special shout out to my friend Gina, who I caught up with yesterday at the Christmas party, and she's been on my show before and looking to make a reappearance sometime in 2018. She's listening right now, so hello Gina. I will eventually return your call. But anyway, to the show today. When we think about body image problems, eating disorders and food management issues, our minds typically turn to matters concerning women. Now, my guest today, Dan Lewin, is an accomplished dietitian and founder of the Men's Health Dietitian, an amazing service dedicated to supporting men with food, eating and body image concerns. He's speaking with me today about these often hidden and very alarmingly dismissed men's issues, disclosing his own long and very difficult journey to self-acceptance and much better health. Dan will also share some insights and tools around his helping philosophy, which is grounded in a weight-neutral, non-diet approach, supporting men to develop a positive relationship with food and themselves. I have Dan on the phone right now, joining me all the way from the sunny Sunshine Coast. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Rae, thanks so much. It's an honour to share this space with you, and I wish I could say it's sunny today on the sunny coast, but the rain has been relentless the last few days.
Wow, so you're copping it too?
We are indeed.
But it's still warm though, I imagine?
It's actually very humid.
Well, that's not good to hear, because you always manage when we hear the Sunshine Coast or the Gold Coast that it's either sunshine or golden and not much in between.
Due to clear up in the next few days.
So. Oh, well, that's good. That's good. Now, Dan, we've known each other for a little while now, not our entire lives, but we actually met on LinkedIn, which is a social networking platform that most people are familiar with, probably more for the professional kinds of people. But I can't remember, did you contact me or did I contact you?
I think I might have requested to connect with you, Rae, and I guess it was all around with that. Mutual connection around an interest in men's health.
Yes.
And, that's just one of the benefits of, I guess, LinkedIn and those kind of social platforms is that, we can connect with people who do have those common interests. So, yeah, very grateful for having that.
Yeah, I remember seeing and reading about your journey because, number one, it was very professionally presented. But also it's unusual to be speaking about topics like men's body issues or eating disorders relating to men. So that sparked my interest, of course, because I'm a very passionate men's issues advocate. And I thought that the way that you presented it was extremely factual. A lot of your stuff is very evidence-based, but also experiential as well. And we did end up catching up over the phone, which was to be a quick sort of introduction. I think we ended up being on the phone for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Where you did tell me a lot about your story and your reasons for being such a strong advocate in the space. And, I was very honoured and very privileged to hear your story, but it wasn't easy for you growing up on the Gold Coast. You come from a family who also experienced some mental health challenges, especially around your mum.
Yeah.
And can you sort of tell us a little bit about that by way of building the context?
Yeah, sure, with pleasure. So as you said, I grew up on the Gold Coast and, one of three children. And I guess, I found out from a very early age, I was very aware that my body was different than my older brothers, for example, and other people's as well.
In what way, Dan?
By the time I was 6 years old, I was already in a bigger body,
Yeah.
and already dealing with the stigma associated with being in a bigger body. I was already being teased by actually my own siblings, by other students at school, and even strangers. Right? So from that very young age, I was aware of, I guess, that whole male body image ideal and what society deems to be as attractive and not attractive.
It's interesting that you term it as being in a bigger body, whereas the general population will call it overweight. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason for that, and there's a few. So, firstly, often there's an indicator called the BMI or body mass index that's being used at an individual level. But the challenge is that this indicator is actually flawed, and it was never intended for personal use. BMI does not differentiate between gender, doesn't tell us anything about our actual lean muscle mass. It doesn't tell us anything about race, and they're all variables that, of course, affect our body size and shape, not to mention our own genetics. So it's meant to be a population-based indicator, not an individual one.
Yep.
And also, with the terms, overweight, for example, it's like, well, over whose weight? As I said, genetics plays a big component of our body shape and size. But when we have, healthy behaviours, we'll naturally fall at a biologically appropriate weight for us as an individual. And certainly the term obese, I never use that term because it's pathologizing, someone's shape.
Yes.
But we actually know from the science behind weight that our health and weight are actually not really associated at all. Right? People can be in many different shapes and sizes and be of good health or of ill health. Right? So, someone who's in a smaller body, it doesn't mean that they're actually going to be healthy.
Oh, absolutely
Just as
not.
much as someone who's in a bigger body, it doesn't mean that they're unhealthy.
Yes.
Right? But I think we just live in a society where people are judged for being a certain size. And certainly there's, those kind of stereotypes. And that's
we do, but
really harmful.
I even met somebody recently who is an advocate for men's health, especially around the weight issues. And, I did a bit of research and saw that a lot of men are like hashtagging, I was fat too. And so what you're saying now kind of really flies in the face of that being a healthy way of addressing how you're feeling. Yeah,
absolutely. Putting weight aside and focusing on our actual health behaviours, right? That has our health behaviours have more to do with our longevity, right? Living a good, long quality of life than the number on the scale. But I think, it's just been that whole social context around you need to look and, weigh a certain size to be healthy. But scientifically, that's actually not accurate.
Yeah. No, I did take you off track of your story, and I want to put you back on at the point where, and this is really important for me when I'm addressing some men's issues that have started with boys, and you were pretty close to your dad, weren't you?
I was very close to my dad, yeah.
And then he left the home when you were quite young.
Yeah, when I was 14, my parents had what I call a messy divorce,
Yes, a divorce bigger than their marriage.
Yeah.
So leaving the home and your feelings of how that was addressed or how that was positioned, I guess the narrative around why he left and how you felt, did that impact you in a way that was overlying the way you were feeling about your body as well?
Yeah, it absolutely did, and I'm happy to, share some of the details. I think it's, it's good to let others know that they're not alone if they're
Yes.
experiencing these things. And, you know, when my dad left, he had an affair with someone he was working with, who
Yeah.
he now, you know, they've actually been married for the last 14 years, and I get on well with her as well. But, you know, being so close to Dad, you know, initially I actually felt betrayed. You know, like how could he do that to me?
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't just to my mum. And then, you know, when things got really messy, you know, the kids, myself included, got caught in the middle. And I don't think any child should ever have to be exposed to those kinds of things. But essentially, you know, what happened was, you know, my life, I felt like I had no control.
Yep.
And the only way to really control things was, you know, certainly as I got into my early 20s, was to try and control my food and my body shape, which had just continued to get bigger
Yes.
as I got into my 20s.
Yes.
And that's quite, you know, a common thing, that when we feel out of control in areas of our life, we start to use food
Yes.
to try and control something.
Yes, because you were actually alienated from your dad for about 13 years, weren't you?
I was, yeah. That was a really difficult time for me. You know, also some of the things that were said about him, whether true or not, it was still very difficult
Yes.
to hear. And again, no child should have to hear those kind of things. And my older brother also left the home very soon after my dad left. So, you know, I was left without any form of, you know, male role model, and
Yeah.
I felt like I just didn't have guidance, and that I couldn't talk about some of the, you know, the male teenage issues, so to speak, of with my mother.
Yes.
And so, you know, I lacked, that ability to discuss those things, and bottled them up.
Yes, and using that relationship with food and with control that you're describing,
Yeah.
is often an outcome, and we see it especially in girls, but we don't recognise it as much in boys, do we?
No, we don't. But, you know, it certainly happens, you know, and just feeling isolated. Again, turning to food in times of isolation is a very, very common practice.
Yeah, well, you mentioned to me when we had that conversation that once you left school that you did really isolate yourself.
Yeah, I did. I was trading the financial markets for myself, and, you know, working from home. And that isolation, you know, wasn't just turning to the food, but, you know, I really became depressed. You know, I was not spending time with friends. I was working very odd hours because I was doing, you know, European and US financial markets. So that lifestyle just didn't lend itself to a normal, balanced life, essentially.
Yeah. So then you went overseas for a while.
I went overseas, but I guess just to give a little bit of extra context, you know, just before I gone overseas in my early 20s, you know, that's when I actually decided to, you know, when I was at, I guess, my highest weight, when I decided to do something about it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's when, instead of addressing my body image issues, that's when I started to try and change my body shape.
Yeah.
So I guess I just want to, if I can just quickly clarify that for people, you know, our body image has nothing to do with the reality of our physical appearance. Our body image is actually quite complex and encompasses our perceptions, thoughts, attitudes and beliefs, and also reactions towards our body.
Yeah.
So instead of addressing, you know, all those inner things, I started to try and change my body shape and to fit that, you know, masculine ideal, which is, you know, often portrayed as the athletic, muscular physique.
Yes,
So
and to achieve that is no mean feat, is it?
Absolutely not. No, you know, to try and outsmart our biology, right, when you think
It's a good
about
way
it,
of
that's
putting
what
it.
we're trying to do.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't, you know, it certainly doesn't work unless we adopt some quite unhealthy behaviours. And, you know, typically to start with, you know, particularly for men, that, you know, and women, that is usually starting to diet and restrict food intake, and also over-exercise.
Yes.
And so certainly that's what I started with as well. And that began the pursuit of that ideal image. And
Yes.
so, first foray into the gym culture, and, in comes the PT. Here's a program for, weightlifting, and here's also, what to do with food, right?
Yes.
Outside of scope of practice, but I didn't know any better at that time.
Yeah.
So, that started then. And then when I did go overseas, I guess I was well into that, pursuit of that image, that body image ideal.
What kind of feedback were you getting, Dan, during this time when you were reducing the size of your body?
Yeah. Really great question. I'm glad you brought it up, because the feedback was so positive, Rae.
Yeah.
Oh, you're looking great. You must be so healthy.
Yes, and happy.
And happy, yeah, exactly.
Because thin equals happy, of course.
Yeah, thin equals happy, right? Because when we get to X kilos, all of our fantasies are going to come true, right? There's this whole, it's when we get to that certain weight or look a particular way, that everything that we dream of is going to come true. But it doesn't, because, being happy or being confident or having, whatever, being successful, they're all internal things and have nothing to do with our external physical appearance. But that's the message that we're sold. When we get to this, weight or look a particular way, we'll achieve, X.
Yes. And often that achievement is through repression, isn't it? As well as excessive output, and the balance is very difficult to get that right.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's just adopting some really unhealthy behaviours to get to that point, and unfortunately all of those positive feedback comments just was constantly reinforcing all of my unhealthy behaviours, as it does to anyone else. So, if someone said, oh, you've been so successful, and you're looking great, well, internally I would say, well, if I look great now, that means I must have looked, bad, or, was not, achieving that ideal before, and I don't want to fail now. So I had to keep on doing those behaviours to, maintain what I was doing.
Yes.
And in fact, it actually got worse.
Well, this was also interrupted when you were about 26 and had a really serious motorcycle accident, and nearly died. Yeah. Which also coincided with re-engaging with your dad too.
Yeah, that's right.
What was that like? I mean, I guess I asked about 3 questions in that.
Yeah, lots going on there. When I had that motorbike accident, where I nearly died, certainly, that's, that often said, second chance at life. And when my dad tried to, reconnect with me, I thought, what if I was a father and, one of my sons had just nearly, died? Like, I had to put myself in his shoes. And I just thought, it's time, I think I just need to also talk to him about a lot of the issues that were festering, that were left unsaid when he did leave, and that we never got to address.
Yep.
And I wanted to confront him. I was still angry.
Yeah.
Even though that level of betrayal might have diminished slightly, I was still very angry. And I said to him, in our first, but before we even met for the first time, I said, look, when we meet, I want you to answer certain questions. I was really upfront that I wanted answers, and he was very open, and very difficult for him as well. I guess he was not excusing his actions. He acknowledged that what he did was wrong, and I guess because of his willingness, to share certain things about how he was coping, or rather not coping, during the time that he didn't see us children, that just all built trust. And I guess that's why, we have such a great relationship today. Like disclosing to me that, over that time when he didn't see the children, that, he had suicidal thoughts.
Yes.
I guess, again, no one's excusing his actions, but, he certainly had many consequences, of those, including mental health.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. And should people be judged by their, choices in life? And does that warrant, to be alienated from your children? It's such a huge event, and one where you just cannot, reclaim that time that's lost in between.
That's right. Yeah, that was a very 13 years. That's a long battle.
Yes.
To try and see your children again, and to go out with a big part of your life.
Oh, definitely. Look, I mean, I work with lots of men's groups, as you know, and one in particular is called Dads in Distress, and I recently spoke at one of their events up in New South Wales. And, sitting in a room full of 20 men, it was just heartbreaking that every single one of those men were alienated from their children, spending exorbitant amounts of money trying to just even get minimal access, and many of them talking about suicidal thoughts because what's the point?
I don't know what to say. It really breaks my heart. It really does. As certainly a son. It does.
Well, that's right. And if you look, when I see some of our really terrible social issues that we have at the moment, namely, violence and, violence by men, that we're not looking at the why, we're just looking at the what, and then branding that and labelling that as something that we need to throw enormous amounts of money at. Yeah. And I think perhaps if we were looking at these earlier interventions around, boys having fathers, for example, and not being, alienated or taken from them, then that's an issue in itself that I think should be addressed. And, you're a perfect example of somebody who's really, really tremendously suffered during that period and not even knowing that your dad was at the same time.
Yeah, definitely, and looking at those underlying issues of why are things happening and not just the outcome.
Yes.
And I think that's right. There's all these things out there. Oh, men aren't emotional, but actually, men are willing to open up. They just need a safe and comfortable space to do it.
Yep. Yep.
And that's where the work that you do is obviously amazing. Yeah.
Well, I don't think there's a day that goes by that I say that's absolutely BS, that, men don't talk, men don't show emotion, and men don't seek help. They absolutely do. And that's why I love you and your work so much as well, because here's finally a pathway that's designed for men, with a male lens over the top of it to help men be better versions of themselves.
Absolutely. Like that word vulnerability, it's amazing when we're willing to put ourselves out there, just how much richer our life becomes. It just gives us that ability to be authentic.
Yes. Oh, and when you see it, it just makes sense. And again, I get to see it every day. And it was only last week or the week before, 5 of us had gotten together about 11 weeks ago and had a gala ball, which was all around raising awareness for male suicide prevention. And we managed to get 160 people there. And it was a great night. Awesome. But one of our speakers was Tom Downey, or is Tom Downey, and Tom recently retired from the AFL due to mental health issues. And he got up for the very first time and spoke in front of 160 people. And I've never seen a man so beautifully vulnerable in a way that he just exuded strength and masculinity in that vulnerability. And the room was just stopped. You could have heard a pin drop.
Awesome.
It was incredible. So that's a bit of a myth, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's a myth, and like you said, it's just having that space, that they're willing to share themselves with others.
Yep.
And certainly in the space that I'm in, in eating disorders and body image dissatisfaction, I think it's so important that guys can feel comfortable to talk about their food and body image issues.
But you can do that because you work in the space. So therefore, you've got the credibility, and you've also got the badge that keeps you safe to say, well, I can talk about this because it's my job. Whereas other men in other workplace settings, and I know that I've talked about this before, really can't. Even the pressure of, in some of those more blokey environments that you really are expected to eat a 4 and 20 for lunch and a Coke.
Yeah.
If you turn up with a healthy salad, that's another, environment of being ridiculed.
Yeah, absolutely. The culture that we're in has such a huge influence.
Yes.
And it's it's an interesting one with the whole, yes, this is man's food and that's women's food, and what about just choosing food that moves you towards your values, irrespective of what anyone else thinks?
Yes, that's right. That's right. And be able to make those choices, as you said, based on your own human condition, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
Now,
and
Dan,
I think sorry, after.
I was just going to say, Dan, we're actually halfway through the show. Can you believe it?
Okay, we're rattling on.
No, it's great. It's great discussion. But usually at this time, I'll play a song.
Okay.
And you've chosen a song especially for the show today, and I just want you to give it a bit of an intro, if you can.
Yeah, so this song I actually heard for the first time just a few weeks ago. It's called Mirror by Goehring, who was on one of the American talent shows. A young guy, 21 years of age, I believe, and an amazing lyricist.
Yeah.
And the song, is actually about body image and society and the pressures that society places on people to look a particular way. But, we live in a size-diverse world, and that's actually something that should be celebrated, rather than berated for being different.
That's right.
And he's one of the few, I think, guys certainly that's out there at such a with such a huge audience that has done something like this. And even though some of the lyrics are around females, I think the message to men is the same.
Yeah.
That you are enough just as you are. And
Yes.
I don't think we hear that enough. And so that's why I chose this song. I think it's a really important message.
When you first heard it, did you think, oh, did somebody just write that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly struck a nerve. Yeah.
Because when I was listening to it last night, I said, to myself, that's Dan's song.
I think, something that I just love about that is, and something you alluded to earlier on, is that, body image dissatisfaction and eating issues, eating disorders, they're not just women's issues. And I think people might be surprised. If you don't mind if I share some stats very quickly.
Please do.
So approximately 5% of the Australian population, is currently living with an eating disorder. And often, eating disorders are portrayed as a 16-year-old white female who's waist thin with anorexia nervosa.
Yep.
But it's actually a really inaccurate picture. People of all sizes and shapes can have an eating disorder or body image dissatisfaction, for that matter. 25% of people who have anorexia or bulimia are actually men. And 40% of people who have binge eating disorder are also men. And binge eating disorder is actually the most common eating disorder. So whilst, we typically, I think, hear about anorexia, that's the picture, it's not the most common eating disorder. And certainly research is showing that just as many men are dissatisfied with their bodies as women. Yeah.
Oh, I sit with men in therapy, and in the privacy of a room, the amount of men who disclose exactly what you've just illustrated is astounding. Well, it's not really astounding. It's just so hidden and so stigmatized that these things can't happen to men. And it's just another example of how men can't find safe environments of disclosure of these alarming issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it's that whole idea that only people of a particular, size or shape will have these issues. But again, I think it would surprise many that, you can have a male who actually looks like, that cover model.
Yes.
And he may very well actually have body image issues.
Oh, Even when I was talking to Tom Downey, who I mentioned before, the AFL footballer, I asked him what it was like for him now that he's not training like he did. And, he said, I have to be so careful just to keep my mind in the right spot and really balance out being kind to myself, but also very concerned about getting out of shape. Not falling into that, what you're describing around some of the more fanatical ways that we go around maintaining our physique.
Well, that's right. It's such a fine line between what behaviours we're adopting to try and stay a particular shape.
Yes.
Many people do suppress their weight to look a particular way, but those behaviours might not be so healthy for that individual.
Yes. Now, for you, though, because you've sort of gone from having one kind of body to a very different kind of body on the other end of the spectrum, but not feeling that happiness. And I know during this time also you married Kate and, started off in your marriage.
Yeah.
What was that like, trying to sort of manage all of that?
Yeah, I did. I've been at all, I guess, extremes of the spectrum in terms of body weight. I was, as I mentioned, a bigger body, and I felt the stigma there. And then, when I was in my mid-20s, as I was talking about earlier, started all of these behaviours in the gym, and I became obsessed with trying to, be thin and muscular.
Yeah.
And, although I didn't seek treatment then, knowing what I know now, no doubt, that was atypical anorexia.
Yes.
I was obsessed. Everything I was doing was around my body and food. And then, when I met Kate, as you naturally do when you start a relationship, things kind of loosen up a little bit, and you go crazy eating, food that maybe you normally wouldn't eat, and not tuning into your own body. But then for me, it actually bounced back the other way, where I was like, okay, well, I need to get bigger and more muscular rather than this thin muscular.
Yeah.
And that started a whole nother pursuit. And it really, can affect not just the individual, but the relationship. I stopped eating many of the foods that I normally would have eaten with Kate.
Yeah.
So, started making 2 separate meals. Some of the other behaviours, my food became very rigid. So, I was weighing food down to the gram.
Yeah.
I started skipping meals and doing the whole intermittent fasting, totally, becoming disconnected from my own body, of course.
Yeah.
And of course, social isolation came with that because, friends would invite me out, and I knew that food would be involved, and I actually was declining social invitations because of fear of having to break my food rules.
Yeah.
So, there was, of course, other physical challenges with these behaviours. When you're restricting energy intake, you really just don't have energy, constantly just hitting a wall.
But I like how you mention a lot, not only have today, but in a lot of the things I read about you, that relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And really understanding that. And I guess while you're going through these kind of almost obsessive compulsive stages of control, that relationship is still there, but it's just not good, is it?
No. It's like, there's just another kind of identity taking over.
Yes.
My self-identity is still there, but it's become not as strong,
Yes.
And it's not until you start to challenge those behaviours and all of those rules that you can start to get your self-identity back.
Yes. Yep. Now, well, I know that you were a photographer originally, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, before I became a dietitian,
Yeah.
I was a photographer.
So you still yet to graduate from your studies?
From dietetics.
Yes.
So I graduated at the end of last year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I just recently launched private practice, the men's health dietitian.
Yes.
And really, as you said, it's just connecting my story with what I do, I think it just gives me that deeper understanding of, the individual, and being able to support them to develop a positive relationship with food and their body.
Yes.
It's a true empathy. I've been in that situation as we've been talking about. So.
Yeah, no, but the website looks fantastic. Again, like everything you do, it's really professional. And for me, I get so excited that men finally have something that's written for men, not a woman's service that we whack a men's label on it and hope for the best. But it's really tackling those issues that are really, really resonant with men. And I noticed actually just a couple of moments ago, we put some stuff on LinkedIn today, you and I, promoting the show today, and Josh Quamby has liked our photo, and he just recently launched Blokepedia, and I know that you were speaking at that launch as well.
I did, yeah.
And I love Blokepedia. If anyone's got a pen out there, write it down. It is one of the best male resources that I've seen that gets across the whole gamut of what it could be like being a bloke, especially in Australia. And it was really funny because I was speaking with Josh on the phone a few months ago, and it was just before he was about to launch Blokepedia, and it was just before I went up to Sydney to speak at the National Male Suicide Prevention Conference, of which I was also interviewed on a radio program called Dad's on the Air. Yep. And the person who was on the air before I was actually Josh.
There you go. He's a great guy. He's doing such amazing things, and really, I guess pushing the boundaries of his own time as well, just to try and, get Blokepedia up and launched. And we actually caught up last week for a coffee because there wasn't such a lot of opportunity at the launch event a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And, on the drawing board, he's certainly got some really great things planned for the year ahead for men, and like his tagline is, it's conversations that matter, and it's not just about mental health. It is actually, having the conversations that, lead to perhaps mental health issues like we were talking about before. What's the underlying thing, Are you having financial issues? Are you having food issues? Are you having relationship issues?
Yes.
And it's starting groups at those levels, and having people just open up and having those discussions in an open and honest way. It
was a big topic that came up for us during the Suicide Prevention Conference. Again, just about male suicide, which is very, very different. And, we talk a lot about that. Most male suicides aren't connected to a mental health problem. In fact, situational distress is probably one of the key contributors to male suicide. So, you're exactly right. It could be a food issue, it could be a relationship breakdown, it could be being alienated from your children, it could be loss of job. Whatever those things, those things can be fixed. But quite often we bypass all of that and go straight to the mental health issue and either medicate it or try and treat something that isn't there.
It's like not treating the person.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Which again goes back to what you're doing and also what Josh is doing. And by the way, you guys do this in your spare time. Like many of us that advocate for men's issues, we're doing it in our spare time. Yeah. We're self-funded, and come on, government, give us some of the money as well. Do you have to give it all to White Ribbon, really? Will that get me in trouble? Probably.
Well, like you say, it's okay to not be okay. And I think even in my situation now, like I've had so much amazing feedback, Rae, and not just from yourself, but others in the industry, dietitians, therapists, etc., about what I'm trying to do in this men's health space. But I think sometimes it's forgotten, and I'm going to share here that I'm struggling. It's hard. It's hard having your own business.
Yeah.
It's hard. I'm going to put it out there. My wife, when I was studying for 4 years, she worked. I didn't work. I was just, pursuing, the grades. And certainly in the first year or two, I was actually still obsessed about, food and body. And, and I felt quite disconnected from her during that time because, that's just where I was. But then even now, financially, it takes a while to build up a business and to do it properly. And so whilst I've got a greater purpose, it's not easy to get these things up and running. And I think, it's just saying, that's okay. And even for me, it's like I'm currently just trying to redefine success.
That's right, and that's a good focus for anyone to have, I think. But you're right, it doesn't put food on the table. And also working in the men's issues space, it doesn't get a lot of airplay, and quite a lot of the time it's rejected. Anything around supporting men specifically gets rebranded as misogynist and women hating, which is so not true, because as the world turns, I generally say this on my show every week also, is that of every minute of every day that passes, another man kills himself, and that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And again, services like yours and support like yours and understanding like yours is the very stuff that keeps men from getting to that point of distress where they feel like that there's nothing. And speaking of vulnerability as well, I was watching on YouTube this morning, Lean In. Now, it's something that you wrote and delivered, which was a open mic night, and you just put it all out there.
That's a way to put. I did, Ray. I sure did. Yeah.
It was great. It was really good. If anyone can, look up YouTube, and I think it's just your name and
Lean In, Dan Lewin. Yeah, and I guess that explores more of my story, and I did that at a time after I just hosted a screening of Embrace, which is the social documentary about body image, and certainly that's geared and focused towards women. I thought as a guy who has had these issues. And an issue that's very under-acknowledged, out there, I thought, well, I'm just going to put myself out there. And I did. It was a great challenge for me in many respects. Not that I'm a professional rapper or spoken word person, but, I just thought it was a good way to do it.
Yeah. Going back to Embrace, though, I've not seen that documentary, and you said, typically it's geared more towards women, but is it worth a watch?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I do encourage women and men to see it, because I think the message, does apply, irrespective of gender. It's an incredible documentary. Taryn Brumpet is really on, a global crusade, to break down these issues around body image and get some positivity out there. She's doing an amazing job. I think it did air, I think, on Foxtel not too long ago. Whether it's on there or not still, I'm not sure. But also, you can purchase the DVD, places like JB Hi-Fi and Sanity. And I apologise if I shouldn't be saying those names, but
I'm sure we've got some in our community here at 3WVC.
Yeah. So it's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, because I think dispelling some of these myths also, and Netflix gets a bit of stick for screening some of their documentaries like 13 Reasons Why relating to suicide and bullying, and there was also one about To the Bone, I think, around. I think I didn't really watch it all. Yeah. But do you think that, and look, the documentaries I've watched, especially 13 Reasons Why, I don't think any way suggests or guides people towards killing themselves, rather really peels the skin and the lens away from what's really happening and the simple things that really affect people's lives.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on documentaries like that?
Yeah, it's tough. I don't have children, so if, it depends on who's watching the person. I think that's an important context.
Yeah.
And so certainly, if a child is going to watch it, that's a parental judgment to make. But on the whole, I think, they're doing probably, more good than harm, in terms of raising awareness around those issues. And as you say, the underlying issues as well, the real life stuff that's going on beneath the outcome. So I think it's good to watch them with a critical and open mind.
Yes. Yes.
I think is the key point there too.
Well, that's right, but it's very difficult to view advertising with a very critical and unbiased eye, isn't it? When we're talking about imagery and how we're seduced by media and advertising.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It needs to be probably a bit more rigour put around that.
Most definitely, and kind of swinging back to body image in this space as well is, the influence of imagery on an individual's body image, because often the images that we see aren't real.
No.
But, unless someone has that literacy around that, then, it can be very misleading and unrealistic. And there's some interesting research around that. You can look at some images, say, in magazines or, the Fitspo stuff, and all it takes is roughly between 2 to 3 minutes for an individual to start feeling, negative about their own body.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
that's incredible, an incredible influence on someone's body image and how they're feeling.
Yes.
It might seem trivial, but I always recommend to people that, if you have social media feeds that are full of bodybuilding or Fitspo things, or just things that aren't making you feel good about your own body,
yes,
are they really serving you? And if not, maybe consider unliking those pages and finding pages that make you feel good.
Yeah. It's difficult, though, isn't it, when it's coming at you at a rate of knots, where we're all hooked up to
We are bombarded,
yes,
Ray. We're bombarded every day with these, and not just images of, models or whatever, but just, messages about food and dieting and weight loss. That diet industry is worth $60+ billion. That's an insane force to reckon with.
Yes.
But they're also selling a message that doesn't work. Again, coming back to the science briefly, dieting or weight loss in the short term, can work, and many people can do it in the short term. But long term, there is no safe way to lose weight, and most people will put the weight back on plus more.
Yes.
Again, we're trying to outsmart our biology, and it just doesn't work. So, often people who are trying to diet and be a smaller body shape will end up, in a bigger body for that very reason.
Yes.
And just coming back to mental health for a second, dieting is associated with depression, anxiety, reduced self-esteem, body image dissatisfaction, nutritional and metabolic problems, and can certainly impact, social health. So it's tough because that's the message that we're constantly
well,
told.
I think it's a fantastic approach, and some of the key things that you've brought out today is around that relationship that you have with your body, with your shape, not with your size, and how you build that relationship and understand how to manage it rather than change it. Is some really good advice. We've got only 3 minutes left of our show, Dan.
Wow, okay.
And I had so many other questions, so I probably will need to bring you back at some stage. But just things around, people who are having surgery for weight loss, or people, that are entering into, medication programs and things like that. I've got some questions about that too, which I think is really important to explore as part of the whole narrative. So.
Most definitely, yeah.
I know coming up next we've got the divine Ken Lyons. Now, Ken Lyons and I did a bit of a stage performance yesterday at the 3WBC Christmas party. Look, I'm not sure what the outcome was, but I had a great time, and we got a few laughs. I'm sure it was at our expense rather than that we created that. But he's talking to one of our very well-known local psychologists, Sally Ann McCormick. So that's always a really good discussion they have. Now, where can people find you, Dan, apart from on the not-so-sunny Sunshine Coast?
Thanks so much, Ray. Yeah, online, it's a bit of a mouthful, but www.themenshealthdietitian.com. I'm certainly on Facebook, so facebook.com/themenshealthdietitian.
I think people have a lot of trouble spelling dietitian. It's a tricky one.
Australian spelling is Dietitan. So it's not with a C.
Not with a C.
That's American spelling.
There you go.
Um,
Now, also to let everybody know that in the next few weeks, this actual interview will be up on my YouTube channel. So if you just type in Rae Bonney and YouTube, you'll get my YouTube channel and you'll be able to hear this interview all over again in all its glory.
Awesome.
So that will be great as well. And you can find me on Facebook too. So just want to remind people that if our conversation today has brought up any feelings for people, Lifeline 131114, suicide callback service is 1300 659 467, and of course 000. It's okay to not be okay. So you've been listening to Rae Bonney, where it really is okay to not be okay. And I've been joined not in the studio but over the phone by Dan Lewin. And I thank you so much, Dan, for making the time to be on the show.
Thanks, Rae. It's been a real pleasure to share this space with you and the opportunity to share some of my story and encourage men to reach out to anyone. You're not alone. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers.
See ya. That was Dan Lewin. I better go now, everyone. Have a safe week, and I'll be back next Monday with another surprise guest. Take care.